there's this guy, Eric Olenwright, scholar. He died recently, but he had this book called "Envisioning Real Utopias," and he outlined 3 different strategies for building like socialist utopia in the real world or whatever. And so it was a book about strategy basically. And he called one path ruptural, which is like revolutionary, right? Another is symbiotic, which is kind of like social democracy, or like you work within electoral politics. And then the other one was interstitial, and this was power building in cultural spaces that are not controlled by the ruling class. And I had like a hard time wrapping my mind around that third pathway, particularly as like a way to do strategy for politics. Is like, what the fuck? How do you make sense of that? But it strikes me that your book is this case study for how to create interstitial spaces that can be used to challenge power. I mean, like the GI coffee houses were a bridge to the peace movement, but they were also incubating a culture that made it possible to organize workers, soldiers, right, who were at the point of production for war and militarism. So big windup, but like, what do you think the prospects might be today for building a third space, like in the Vietnam War movement, right, that challenges kind of bro culture, challenges hyper militarism? Do you see it? Do you see a window or
To me, like if there's any hope for that kind of building of utopian practices and spaces, it's in that. It's when people are at rock bottom, right? When they want something else and they want something different. The opportunity, if there were any successes of these coffee houses, and I don't want to make it to think that these coffee houses changed the world, because ultimately they were crushed by the state and they had a hard time existing while they were around. But some extraordinary things happened out of them. And there were a lot of important people and ideas that came out of the coffee houses. But it's always a process. And if there are any kind of examples of how dialectical history can be, it's that these coffee houses existed most successfully when they were good businesses. When they were attractive businesses that invited in the rest of the community and not just a bunch of communists. Instead, had a kind of broad cultural appeal. I'll put it that way. They had bands. There were a couple coffee houses. The most successful of these was the Oleo Strut in Killeen, Texas, which was famous for, Jane Fonda visited that place, and she was a part of the coffee house network as well. But they put on shows, and they ended up for a while they decided to get away from being a straight political center and decided to open up and be like a kind of like a roadhouse, a place where people could listen to rock and roll. And it's actually where I think there were some big bands that got their start there. Steve Earle played there when he was young. But either way, the idea that they were successful when they were popular is something that the left needs to think about. Is like how you appeal to a broad audience, and those are questions that were big arguments within the coffee house organizer community. Like, what are we doing here? Are we making are we preaching to the choir, or are we starting a sort of network that could be something huge? And I think that balance, I mean, we talked about Chapo Trap House just now, right? Like the balance between trying to reach a huge audience by using all the aesthetic techniques that it takes to do that, versus our communist reading group. They're sort of like, what are the difference between those two things? Well, I mean, to me, they're not separate. To me, those worlds are connected. And the GI coffee houses are one example of sort of how you kind of got to approach it in a hybrid way. I think that there is an element of playing the circus a little bit, in order to catch people's attention.
Yeah, that is profoundly smart. DMX, the rapper, before he died, I heard him talking about how like when you make a rap song, the most important thing is the beat. If you don't have a good beat, nobody will listen. And if you have a good beat, then they'll listen to it long enough to catch the hook. And so the
Mm-hmm.
hook's got to be good. It's all like necessary but insufficient, necessary but insufficient. And it's only if the beat is on point and the hook is catchy, then they will start to pay attention to your lyrics. Otherwise, your lyrics could be toilet paper. It doesn't matter. It's
Right.
irrelevant, you know?
Right.
There's
Yeah.
something very much in what you just said there.
That's true. I mean, it's funny to realize how many like sometimes you'll like look at the lyrics of a song you've heard a million times in your life, and you're like, those are the lyrics,
Yeah,
like,
it's like, what?
and it's like
What?
I thought I knew this song. I've heard it a million times. I know it well. I actually really love this song. It might be one of my favorite songs ever, but I've never actually considered the words. That's a
Yeah,
trippy idea because you think about that artist poring over the lyrics, trying to get them exactly right, and it's like, no, just get that vibe and that groove. That's what
yeah,
we want, and the words
yeah.
don't matter. I mean, that's yeah. I think the left needs to come to that idea. And what I mean by that is sort of grapple with that idea, and
Mhm.
figure out how to have a medium, how to have a medium and a message, I suppose.